So I hope you enjoyed this music from Thelonious Monk. His piano compositions are actually quite unorthodox. He combines percussive attacks with sudden key changes.
He's actually one of my favorite jazz artists. And as I understand it, he's also the favorite of this week's artist, Piet Mondrian.
Yeah, and we actually have a book, Mondrian's art back here. It's actually a fascinating artist.
He definitely is.
Yeah, Monk and Mondrian actually became friends. They discovered that music and painting are very similar in some ways. When Monk spoke about his music, he compared it to the precision of Mondrian's paintings.
Actually, AJ, I've got my paint and my paper right here.
All right, excellent. So we're gonna first actually talk about some of the colors that Mondrian used, and yellow was actually one of his favorite colors.
Right.
First, and there's actually 4 types of yellows we're going to talk about. The first, there is yellow ochre. This is one of the oldest colors used in art. We find ochre on the 17,000-year-old cave paintings in France, actually.
We did, and ochre is also a color used for skin by Egyptian and Roman murals.
Huh, fantastic.
Yeah, in fact, you just kind of get a look at what this looks like. It's definitely yellow, but it's kind of more of a brownish yellow.
Yeah.
You all can see that in the camera.
It's a really unique yellow, actually.
It is.
Yeah, and it's iron-based, and here's actually the formula, since we all actually have been doing chemistry lessons for each of the town halls. So it's iron-based. You can see here's the formula for ochre.
So basically, this is rust?
I guess you could say that.
It's iron and water, if I'm reading the equation correctly.
If you look carefully at rust, maybe it has a little bit of ochre in it.
Yeah.
Yeah, the second yellow is actually from a mineral. It was discovered in 1762 in Siberia, and it's called chromium. When chromium powder is mixed with acid, a yellow color appears. The formula is actually lead chromate, and let me show you the formula. And Jacques is going to actually show us what that looks like too.
Yeah. So let's see. Here we go. Let's paint this, and I'll bring this up to. Again, you can see the contrast in the colors between the two.
The two yellows, yeah, for sure.
Quite a bit brighter.
Yep, absolutely. All right, now let's go to the third yellow, which is actually an interesting yellow, cadmium yellow. Cadmium is a soft, silvery white metal plus soluble lead salts. It's actually very toxic to humans. It's actually been known to be used to poison people. Probably artists use it quite a bit, I'm guessing, to poison any of their enemies.
Get rid of the competition.
Yeah.
Is that the idea?
Exactly. Yeah. The pigment's actually resistant to fading. So for that reason, artists actually love this yellow. And the formula is really simple. Cadmium sulfate. Jacques is going to show us what that yellow looks like.
Yeah. Let's take a quick look at that. So you can kind of see the contrast in the yellows.
Right there. Yep. Perfect.
Yeah. In fact, chromium or chrome yellow is used for school buses and road signs. And in fact, one of the things that we found is that yellow creates a great contrast to black. And so that's one of the reasons why they use it for those signs. So you can actually see the letters very clearly.
Cool. All right. So now let's go on to the fourth yellow. And for this one, I have to ask India for help. And it's actually a very unusual yellow. It's called Indian yellow. It's obtained when cows actually eat mango leaves. And the urine is collected in buckets, and it's then dried into a paint powder.
Yeah, I'm glad you didn't ask me to prepare that one. Although now that I'm looking at my cup, I'm a little concerned.
Does that have a funny taste to it, John?
No, fortunately not.
Okay. So hey, let's see how Mondrian actually uses these 4 yellows. On to Sarah of Art Talk number 50. Sarah, welcome.
Hi, everyone. Welcome. Thanks for that introduction. Here we go. I'm just going to share my screen quickly. Perfect. So Piet Mondrian, born in 1872 as Pieter Cornelius Mondrian Jr., grew up as the second of 5 children in a devout Calvinist home in central Holland. Art and music were encouraged in his household. His father was the headmaster of the local primary school and was an enthusiastic amateur artist who gave drawing lessons to his son, while also Mondrian's uncle, Fritz Mondrian, was an accomplished artist who taught his nephew to paint. In 1892, Mondrian enrolled at the Royal Academy of Visual Arts in Amsterdam. His 3 years of academic training focused on drawing and copying the old masters and genre painting, a very, similar art upbringing and education to many artists at this time, with this kind of copying the old masters and things like that. And Mondrian would eventually rely on these skills to support himself by producing scientific drawings and copies of museum paintings, as well as giving private drawing lessons in his studio. So in 1905, Mondrian was introduced to the French post-impressionists, which changed his paintings dramatically as a result. He began integrating bold color and brushwork like that of Vincent van Gogh and the pointillist techniques of Georges Seurat, if you remember, the artist we talked about a few weeks ago. However, the influence of Cubism really marks a turning point in Mondrian's career. In 1912, he moved to Paris, which was, as we know, the thriving center of the avant-garde art world at this time, and became fully immersed in the works of Picasso and others. So Mondrian shifted from this kind of representational neo-impressionist style to these very modern abstractions. Analytic cubism gave Mondrian the structure necessary to refine his landscapes to their sparest elements of line and shape. So he made use of the cubist grid, reducing his images of trees and buildings to a schematized framework. So during his first years in Paris, Mondrian temporarily adopted the cubist kind of muted gray and yellow-brown palettes. However, unlike the cubists, Mondrian wished to stress the flatness of the painting surface rather than to allude to three-dimensional depth as the cubists depicted. So instead of using the grayscale and accentuating kind of shadow and depth, he stressed the flatness by using these bright colors. So here we have Still Life with Ginger Pot, done in 1911 and 1912. And during this period and intermittently until the mid-1920s, Mondrian created more than 100 pictures of flowers. In Still Life with Ginger Pot 1, which is the piece in the background, Mondrian began to employ an avant-garde technique known as passage, which is brushwork that continues beyond the designated edges of objects. And it's kind of a generally looser handling of the paint. However, Still Life with Ginger Pot 2, which is the picture in the bottom right corner, takes the artist's first depiction of this motif to a much greater level of abstraction. So here you can see an accentuated use of the cubist grid that I mentioned earlier. Here we have Composition in Oval with Color Planes, done in 1914. And the geometry of this composition, made 2 years after Mondrian moved from Holland to Paris, is directly based on sketches of partially demolished buildings with exposed floors, chimneys, and kind of patches of wallpaper. And I personally find this piece very juxtaposed because there's sort of this disarray to it with the different colors and the many small shapes kind of all on top of each other to represent these, decaying buildings. But Mondrian believed that these horizontal and vertical lines, such as those he used here, expressed an underlying universal order. So it's this interesting dichotomy between order and disarray. Mondrian was a contributor to the Distill art movement and group, which he co-founded with Theo van Doesburg. And he evolved a non-representational form, which he termed neoplastism. So this was a, quote, new pure plastic art, which he believed was necessary in order to create a universal beauty. So in his work, Mondrian tried to seek a balance between lines and colors and strive for an abstraction that evokes a universal and timeless image. So Composition in Color A is a study towards that kind of pure neoplastism. The colors in this work are a muted version of the primary colors. So you've got dark rose red, deep blue, and dark ochre. And this painting is actually much more muted than the image on the screen in person. But the clearly delineated colored areas are linked together with these black line fragments. So in the 1920s, Mondrian began to create the definitive abstract paintings for which he's best known. This is composition with large red plane, yellow, black, gray, and blue. So he limited his palette to white, black, gray, and the three primary colors, with the composition constructed from these thick black horizontal and vertical lines that delineated the outlines of the various rectangles of color. So the simplification of the pictorial elements was essential for Mondrian's creation of a new abstract art, distinct from Cubism and Futurism. So the assorted blocks of color and lines of differing width create these rhythms that kind of ebb and flow across the surface of the canvas, echoing the varied rhythm of modern life. The composition is asymmetrical, as in all of his mature paintings, with one large dominant block of color, here red, balanced by the distribution of the smaller blocks of yellow, blue, gray, and white around it. And this style has been quoted by many artists and designers in all aspects of culture since the 1920s. Again, in this piece, similar to the last, we can see Mondrian's adherence to this neoplasticism. It was this rigorous form of abstraction that was limited to these vertical and horizontal lines and the three primary colors. And as you can see in the smaller image, fashion designer Yves Saint Laurent paid homage to Mondrian in 1965 by creating these mod cocktail dresses modeled after his work. And you can even see the models posed next to the real Mondrian piece. New York City 1 marks the beginning of a new phase in Mondrian's work. The black lines have disappeared, along with the rectangles of primary color. And there's kind of a more lightness and busyness to this compared to some of the previous neoplasticism pieces. There's almost a briskness to this piece. And in the rhythm of these paintings, there's a new feeling of harmony, which Mondrian could have only learned in his new surroundings. It's kind of the rhythm of the modern metropolis. So this piece is kind of a visual representation of the effect that living in New York City had on him. Victory Boogie Woogie, done from 1942 to 44, is a painting that Mondrian conceived in expectation of victory of World War II, and that actually remained unfinished because of his death on February 1st, 1944. And this piece adds to the innovations of his American period. Even if in its half-finished state, it's remarkable to see how Mondrian, already over 70, was capable of a liveliness. And I love this piece because it's hung from the corner. I just think that's such a simple thing to do, but it makes it so unique and such a modern idea. Mondrian's legacy was enormous in the Netherlands. Here you can see a stamp celebrating the Distiel art movement from 1983. But his legacy goes beyond that and is truly global and timeless. You think about what some of the most popular collectibles nowadays are, and it's sneakers. These are limited edition Mondrian Nikes that can go for, upwards of thousands of dollars. And he's created this unique and timeless modernity with his style. It's kind of exactly what he was going for, this timeless abstraction that will just always be modern. And Mondrian's far-reaching impact can be seen really all across aspects of modern and postmodern culture. Thanks, everyone, and special thanks to Lucky and Tom for their help on this.
Hey, thank you so much, Sarah. I've learned so much about Piet. He's actually one of my favorites, and I think also Jacques' favorites.
Absolutely.
I wish I had that pair of sneakers.
You know who really wants those sneakers? I can tell. Lucky's like,
Yeah. And I learned a new word, neoplasticism. What a
Right.
great word.
It is
All
a
right,
great word.
Fantastic. Thank you, Sarah. That was great. So